Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are tuning in. Thank you so much once again for joining me today for my next installment of Facebook and Instagram Live. And today I will be talking primarily about equanimity. And if you've been with me before at these sessions, you know that I am really intending to offer these sessions roughly twice a week as a way of cultivating a certain type of momentum into an online meditation program that I'll be offering. And so I'll just speak a little bit about that and then we'll move into the topic. So, the online meditation program that I was referring to is entitled Abiding in Kindness, Compassion, Joy, and Equanimity. And this is a 12-week immersive online meditation program. It runs from October 1st to December 21st, so it's really right around the corner at this point, just coming up. The program is offered in two sections to cater to different time zones and needs according, however you're comfortable. Section A meets on Tuesday and Saturday mornings from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. East Coast Standard Time. Section B meets also on Tuesdays and Saturdays, but in the evening at 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. East Coast Standard Time. Now, these sessions are offered over Zoom and they will be recorded. The recordings are made available only to the participants, and that's in case people have to miss. Some people, register for the course knowing that they'll miss a few sessions, and then other things come up, they may miss a few more, and that's totally fine. Some people register for the course and intend to do the whole thing by video on their own time. That's also fine. You're welcome to do that. So as much or as little as the live sessions that you're comfortable doing, you're welcome to modify the program to suit your needs. So if you'd like to find out more about the program, the 12-week meditation program, please do go visit my website, suchsweetthunder.org, and all of the information will be there right on the home page. Feel free to go there and check it out. Also, feel free to send over any questions you might have around that. So let's talk a little bit about equanimity and finding balance in the midst of life's unfolding. And this, teachings on equanimity really date back to the first teaching of the Buddha, probably perhaps earlier than that, I'm not sure. That's where I know its inception to be. And in the first discourse, the first teaching that the Buddha ever gave, and this is a discourse called the Dharma Wheel, setting the Dharma Wheel in motion, the discourse which set the Dharma Wheel in motion. It's a beautiful discourse. It's only about 2 or 3 pages long, and definitely worth reading. If you're curious about it, you could Google it, and it will come up. Or you could ask me to send over a PDF of it, and I'm happy to do that as well. So I won't read the whole discourse here. I just want to take just that part around this middle way, or equanimity. So the Buddha said, "I have found a middle way that does not lead to 2 dead ends." Which 2? The dead end of addiction to self-mortification and the dead end to addiction to luxury, essentially pleasure, sensual pleasure. And it's interesting, he chose those 2 polarities, self-mortification, self-indulgence, let's say, as a way of illustrating the middle way. And, it helps to know the context of where that discourse was given. He was teaching to 5 students that were ascetics. And asceticism is basically the idea that if we punish our body and beat our body into submission, that we will no longer suffer. That's a very gross reductionistic view of asceticism, but that's essentially what it is. And the Buddha was also an ascetic before he became the Buddha. And so he knew his audience, right? He says, you don't need to be addicted to this self-mortification, right? It doesn't lead to awakening. It doesn't lead to the release of suffering. The Buddha also was, speaking from his own personal experience around self-indulgence. He was born a prince. It's said that for the first 29 years of his life, he literally wanted for nothing. He had a summer palace and a winter palace, and musicians that would entertain him, and lavish buffet meals every day, every night, and so forth. And so he really knew these two extremes very well. And he said, neither extreme leads to freedom. We can find a middle way. We can find a middle way. And, maybe we can explore this a little bit in pragmatic terms. Most of us know what it feels like to hold on, to cling to, or to covet one of those polarities. Maybe not those two in particular, but let's use the example of, let's say I'm living in a situation with other people. I have roommates, right? And let's say I'm the kind of person who likes things very clean and tidy and organized, right? And then one of my roommates is very loose and casual, let's say, and he leaves dirty dishes around for a little while, or leaves clothes here and there. Now, if I'm really holding on to my view, I'm going to see that roommate as a slob, uncaring, maybe thoughtless, right? And if that person is holding on to their view of being casual and open and relaxed, right, and thinking that that's the way it ought to be, then he's going to see me, or she's going to see me as controlling, anal, OCD perhaps, right? And so we can see how, clinging or holding on, even, and this happens quite unconsciously, I think, for most people, that this leads to conflict. Also quite interesting in that example is, you might notice whatever's going on for me becomes the other person's fault, right? Likewise, whatever going on with that person, if they're seeing me in that, with that adversity, they're gonna blame me, right? So the idea is to find, well, first to feel where it is that we're holding, and recognize that is simply a view, right? And that starts to kind of loosen the grip on that contraction, that holding. A little later in the Buddhist discourses, the Buddha actually outlined what he called the vicissitudes of life, or the worldly winds, the 8 worldly winds. And these are called the worldly winds because they blow in and out of all human lives, right? And these were identified as gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain, and success and failure. And just like that example that I gave with the roommate, here we can, very clearly see how easy it is to cling and to grasp to the gain and to push against the loss, right? And this creates an imbalance. Right? We end up pursuing the pleasure and pushing against the pain. Right? We end up pursuing the success and pushing against or fleeing the failure. Not recognizing that we can only know what success feels like in the shadow of failure. Right? We can only feel the goodness of praise in the shadow of blame. So these qualities are intimately connected and rely on each other. And in fact, how I've come to see that as a spectrum, right? So we can let go of the gain and the loss, that duality, and just see that as, gain being on one side of the spectrum and loss being on the other side of the spectrum. And then when we can hold those two polarities together, which we'll explore in a meditation in a little while, we start to recognize all of the shades and colors on that spectrum. So I want to read a little story here. This is kind of an old folk story, and I've heard it in many places. I'm reading it today from one of my teacher's books, my root teacher, Ken McLeod, in his book, Wake Up to Your Life. If you're not familiar with this book, I strongly recommend it. It's really a phenomenal book. It was life-changing for me. And here's the story of equanimity. A farmer lived with his son on a few acres of land. They were not well off, but they did have one horse, a good horse, with which they were able to plow the fields. One day, while they were repairing its paddock, the horse escaped and ran away. When the neighbors heard about the loss of the horse, they came around to commiserate. The farmer would have none of it. "What makes you think this is a disaster?" he asked, and then he sent them away. A week later, the horse returned with a wild horse accompanying it. The farmer now had 2 horses. When the neighbor heard the news, they came around to celebrate, but again the farmer would have none of it. "What makes you think this is a blessing?" asked the farmer. A few weeks later, the son was thrown from the new horse while breaking it in and badly broke his hip. He healed up to a point, but although he was still able to help his father, his activities were limited. Again, the neighbors came to commiserate, and again the farmer asked, "What makes you think this is a disaster?" The next month an army came through. Short on troops, the officers conscribed every able young man they could find and forced them at gunpoint to join the war. But the army had no use for anyone with a broken hip. And it goes on and on in this way. And, this really speaks to this idea of these worldly winds that blow through all of our lives, right? It's never the end of the story, right? And as one of my teachers likes to say, what follows peace is non-peace. How could it be otherwise, right? What follows non-peace is peace, right? What follows kindness is unkindness. What follows unkindness is kindness. And this is the flow of life. And I'll read again here another passage. This is from the Zen master Hui Ning, and this is from the Platform Sutra. Dark itself isn't dark. It is due to light that dark becomes dark. And light itself isn't light. It's due to dark that light becomes light. Because light changes into dark, and dark gives way to light, their appearance and disappearance depend upon each other. How can we know gain without the experience of loss? Right? How can we know pleasure without the experience of pain. I'll just read one more, and this comes from Lao Tzu from the Taoist tradition. All of the world knows beauty, but if that becomes beautiful, this becomes ugly. All of the world knows good, but if that becomes good, this becomes bad. Have and have not create each other. Hard and easy produce each other. Long and short shape each other. High and low complete each other. And so it's worth noting here, I know, we read these beautiful poems from various traditions and we can kind of get a sense of what they're pointing at. But it's very easy to kind of slip into a quality of indifference then, right? Particularly if we're holding space for another, right? And maybe they're experiencing some pain. We don't want to, be with that person and suggest that, oh, this will just pass, right? Don't worry, this pain is inconsequential because eventually you'll feel pleasure again, and just hold your seat and that kind of thing. That can become a kind of tyranny. So our equanimity is incomplete without compassion, right? And if we're not able to hold space for another or our own struggle, then our equanimity will be out of balance, right? We'll be using it as a way of as an escape, as a way of numbing out, or becoming aloof to the struggles of ourselves and others. So we want to always keep that in mind, that equanimity and compassion are kind of two wings of a bird, right? We need both wings to fly straight. And so, we have these experiences of life, the flow of life, let's say, the flow of life, this ever-changing, ever-impermanent experience of life, right? And then, because the human nervous system is wired to gravitate towards the pleasant, the pleasurable, the safe, the comfortable, and to push against what's threatening and fearful and painful, we naturally start to grasp and to cling at what feels good. Right? We're wired to do that. And, let's look at this tendency. So let's say, I'm going about my day-to-day experience. I'm comfortable with the ever-changing flow of life. And then something pleasant comes along, and I take that out of, let's call that the flow of life. I like to call that the river of ever-changing experience. The river of the ever-change, let's say. And so, maybe I have a lovely conversation with a good friend, and I'm, thinking about that conversation for a few hours after. I've taken it out of the river of ever change and made it into a solid, fixed experience. I'm looking at the conversation in my memory. And then maybe I'm thinking, oh yeah, and then when I said that, oh maybe I could have said that. When I start to think about it, I've made it into a thing, an object. And in some ways that can feel pleasant in and of itself, because if I make an experience into a thing, into an object, it helps me to feel like a thing as well, like an object as well. So I myself have become a permanent fixed entity, analyzing, experiencing, holding, grasping, or clinging to a solid fixed experience. This is the illusion of permanency that gives rise to suffering. right? So now I've become a solid fixed I, looking and holding and grasping a solid fixed experience. That's an illusion because nothing is solid and fixed, right? That illusion is what gives rise to suffering. Likewise, we can look at it from a different view. Let's say I'm, in and about my day, I'm going about the experiences of life, I'm in the flow, and then I experience something painful. Right? I get triggered or activated, right? Now I've taken that experience out of that river of ever change, and now I'm clinging to it, but in a different way, clinging to it because I want to get rid of it, right? Trying to wrestle with it, struggle with it, push it away, right? And again, that in a sense feels pleasant because I've become a solid fixed I. It reinforces this sense of ego. And this becomes very clear with self-righteousness. Right? Self-righteousness has that pleasant quality to it. Right? I know I'm right. So if I'm wrestling with an experience that is unpleasant, it kind of gives me this feeling of being a solid fixed I, with the illusion that I can get rid of that solid fixed other. Tease it apart, solve it, figure it out, get rid of it somehow. And the irony here is that, particularly when we're working with discomfort, is that when we're wrestling with it, pushing it away, trying to get rid of it, it actually holds it in place longer. Right? Because we've given it a sense of beingness. We've taken it out of the river of impermanency. We've taken it out of that river of the ever change and given it a life. And in doing that, we give ourselves a type of life. Right? But the only suffering comes from that. Only struggle comes from that. And so the idea, and what we'll explore in a meditation momentarily, is to rest in the flow of the ever-changing experience. Right? Going back to that story of the farmer, if the farmer was really, wrestling with the experience of his horse running away, right? Chewing on it in his mind, it would have made that situation much more solid and fixed. And it would have given himself a solid and fixed personality that's struggling with that experience, right? And so in that letting go, we recognize that this experience in front of me is a part of the ever-changing flow of life. I don't need to wrestle with it. And in that letting go, we also feel, I myself am too a part of that ever-changing experience called life. So, we don't want to get into, a kind of suppression here. That can happen, right? So we hear teachings on this, and I can just rest in this. And then we forget to enjoy and to drink in and to allow ourselves to be nourished by the pleasantness of life. That's important too. That's a way of cultivating resilience and strength. We need to be able to do that. And in that nourishment from what's pleasant and what's positive, we cultivate a type of ease and ability to rest amidst what's difficult. Knowing that eventually what's difficult will give way to what's pleasant. So we don't need to engage in that pushing, right? Remember, it's that pushing away that gives what's unpleasant a life of its own. And it makes us feel like a permanent fixed I. Right? So just this very knowing, and a knowing not intellectually, but a knowing viscerally, somatically, this type of knowing allows us to rest and find that balance in the ever-changing experience we call life. We can rest with the negative, right? Rest with the unpleasant. Provided that's within our window of tolerance. If you start to, feel overwhelmed by that, then, take a walk, name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, so forth, orienting yourself, grounding yourself. And then see if you can come back and rest. Feeling the negative, but the tension that's there, the stress, from that quality of rest. From that quality of rest. So I've talked quite a bit, and I think I'd like to offer a guided meditation here. And so what we'll do is I'll ring the bell. I'll invite us to connect quite briefly, connect to the present moment. And we will meditate on one set of these worldly winds. Let's use, what am I feeling today? Let's use gain and loss. Let's use gain and loss. So in the meditation we will, I'm not quite sure exactly how we'll explore that. We'll perhaps go into the body and explore what gain feels like in the body and loss feels like in the body, and try to become sensitive to how they kind of flow in and out of each other, feeling that and experiencing that spectrum of gain and loss and all of the shades and colors in between. So we'll probably do this for maybe 15 minutes or so. It'll be an abbreviated practice because I talked quite a bit longer than I thought I might. And I hope you all enjoy. This can be done in any posture, but if you think you might fall asleep, I would strongly recommend an upright posture with your back not leaning against a rest. But if you're not in danger of falling asleep, then really any posture will do. Enjoy. So I'd like to invite us now to just notice the present moment. We might start by noticing how the body feels in this current posture. Whether you're seated or standing or lying down. And simply noticing the contact points of the body. If the body is resting against a cushion or chair or mat. Exploring what that contact feels like, the body resting. And if you're using a chair like I am, you might really explore the pressure there, the body against the chair. There may be some tingling or warmth. Often our body can engage in a type of bracing internally. So just inviting any internal bracing to soften. And allow the body to rest a little bit further into the chair or the cushion or the mat. We might also notice the contact of the feet against the floor or the ground or the carpet. Perhaps noticing sensations of clothing resting against the skin. And in addition to notice the sensations of clothing against the skin, we might also notice the temperature of the air against the skin. So this could give us a view of the entire body, perhaps. And then inviting the body to relax, rest. And there may be areas of the body that don't want to relax and soften, and that's normal, that's fine. We don't need to try to force anything or make anything happen. Just rest. Noticing the body and how the body is right now. And then in the next breath or two, perhaps bringing awareness to the hands. And simply noticing the hands, any sensations that might be there. And see if you can let go of the word hands and notice the actual felt experience. What's there? Maybe a kind of tingling or warmth, tension or pressure. When we get rid of the label, the concept, hands, we might start to experience that area as a flow of energy, a flow of sensation. A constellation of sensations, if you will. And then the concepts might return, and that's fine, that's normal. You could label that thinking, returning back to that non-conceptual experience of that area we think of as hands. And then perhaps in the next breath or two, bringing that same non-conceptual view to the arms, from the wrists to the shoulders. There might be pulsating, warmth, tension, tightness, tingling. We might include the shoulders as well, going above or beyond the concepts. What's that flow of ever-changing sensations? Perhaps including too the torso. Noticing how the entire torso moves with the in-breath and out-breath. Noticing that constellation of sensations throughout the torso. You might imagine or visualize yourself walking through your torso, maybe with a flashlight internally, shining that flashlight of awareness on the different areas of tension, softness, the organs in the abdomen, the muscles. Going above or beyond any concepts, any words, and exploring the actual felt experience. We might include the legs as well. The upper legs, the lower legs. Some temperature, a quality of weight or density, looseness, tightness, tingling. We might include the feet as well, going above or beyond any concepts, any words. What's the actual experience? And perhaps including too the neck and throat. The cheeks of the face, the back of the head and the top of the head. And so we are invited here to explore this field of ever-changing sensation, from the bottom of the feet to the top of the head, from the tips of the fingers to the center of the heart. And if the mind is wandering, remember that's normal. We could label that thinking, and coming back to this non-conceptual experience, the felt experience. This might simply feel like sensations floating in space. And then, while we're here, resting as sensations floating in space, I'd like to invite us to bring into awareness some recent experience of loss. Not using something overwhelming, something perhaps a 3 on the scale of 1 to 10, as far as difficulty. Maybe a friendship ended in a way that was unexpected, or some form of employment came to an end abruptly. Holding this experience of loss lightly in awareness. Going to the body, and what does that loss arise as in the body? How did the sensations of the body change when we brought in that experience of loss? There may be some sadness there. So what does that sadness, how does that sadness arise as sensation in the body? If there are stories coming up around the situation, just gently put those to one side. Let's go back to the sadness of loss. How does that emotion constellate in the body? The areas of tightness, of tension, contraction, perhaps around the heart or the abdomen or the face, the jaw. And just staying with it, just staying with it. Surfing the emotion of loss. Notice the change. Don't have to push it away. We can rest in this ever-changing felt experience of sadness. Naturally, what follows loss is gain. Following the sensations of sadness without the story. And you might notice that the sadness comes to an end. We metabolize the emotion. There's a space. Bringing now into awareness some recent experience of gain. Made a new friend. Discovered a new practice. Learned something new. Notice how the emotion of sadness from loss leads into the pleasantness of gain. Like a wave that gently meets the shoreline. It crests against the shore and retreats back into the ocean. So too the ever-changing flow of loss to gain and gain to loss. And holding a memory of gain lightly in awareness, and enjoy the pleasantness that's there without clinging. And of course, there may be strategies that arise. How can I make this last? How can I remember how to recreate this? And perhaps we can just gently put those to one side. And just stay with the felt experience of gain. recognizing it not as a goal or as something to be coveted, but rather as the natural flow, the natural ebb and flow of life. And then, while holding this experience of gain, how does that constellate in the body? The emotion of accomplishment, perhaps? Satisfaction? How does that show up? Again, getting rid of the stories and simply observing the felt, sensate experience. And then, perhaps in the next breath or two, the invitation is to hold equally in awareness the experience of gain and the experience of loss. And I like to hold the gain on my right side of the body and the experience of loss on the left side. But however you interpret that, that's up to you. Maybe holding the images, the memories of gain and loss equally at the same time. And so while holding the experience of loss and gain equally, not preferencing one over the other, we start to feel a balance point in between these two qualities. Gain and loss, pleasure and pain, light and dark. By holding the two poles equally, we experience the entire spectrum. We find balance in the midst of gain and loss. We find ease in the midst of chaos and order. We find home in the middle of pleasure and pain. And so in a few moments' time, we'll begin to shift away from the guided meditation and back into a conversational space. And I'll cue that by ringing the bell 3 times. So thank you all for joining me in that guided meditation. I hope you all find that enjoyable and helpful. And just, if your eyes are still closed, you might just gently open them and start to reorient yourself, looking around the room. So I don't think I'll offer too much more. Kind of send us off into the day in that meditation. I will be offering one more of these sessions, and then I'm opening the online program that I've mentioned. So that'll bring the Facebook Live sessions to an end, very likely anyway, at least for some time. And that session will probably be on Wednesday morning, but I haven't decided yet. Keep a lookout for my advertisements if you're interested. And that will be a Q&A session. So if you have any questions about what you saw here today or any of the previous sessions, or really anything pertaining to kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, please feel free to send those questions over. I do have some questions already that I think will be helpful to speak to. But anyway, please send over any questions you might have. If I don't get to it in the session, I'll send you an email with a reply. So there's the invitation for that. And I hope to see you on the retreat. Please do come along. Again, my website, suchsweetthunder.org, if you want to find out more about the online programs. And have a great week, everyone. See you next time. I'll ring the bell to close us out. Thank you.